the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts. Screaming white-hot flames and agony, she challenged millions of headhunters, dragging and ripping apart impossible tender moments of time, shipping vessels of history, ancient history, destroying the fabric, the godlike claw of destiny of a people with a gun, a knife, a cannon, building the hideous wall of blood called slavery. She challenged it with burning eyes and black skin, torn skin, whipped skin, degraded skin, smashed skin, dehumanized skin, the humanized skin. Strong enough to bring a free, strong enough to be free, to be free. To be free, strong enough to bring a fee, strong enough to be free.
Good afternoon, and as always, welcome back. Al Jazeera reports Iran demands accountability for Israel and U.S. after war of aggression. Iran's foreign minister uh, Abbas Araghchi has warned that if Israel is not held accountable for its attack on Iran, quote, the whole region and beyond will suffer, end quote. The U.S. and Israel attacks on our nuclear facilities were in stark violation of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, as well as the UN Security Council Resolution 2231 that has endorsed Iran's peaceful nuclear program. Meanwhile, according to Al Jazeera, Yemen's Ansar Allah has claimed to have sunk a ship, exchange attacks with Israel. Israeli military attacks ports of Hodeidah, Ras Isa, and As Salif as Ansar Allah continues to launch missiles towards Israel. And amidst all of this, Trump held a 90-minute second meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House yesterday. The leaders were joined by Vice President J.D. Vance. And folks, you got to ask yourself, what is an alleged war criminal doing traversing the halls of Congress and conversing with an American president? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most events take place. Let's quickly look at some of today's headlines. The Guardian asks, has the Trump-Putin bromance finally run its course? U.S. President appears to have run out of patience with his Russian counterpart. But how that transmits into practical support for Kiev remains to be seen. Quote, I'm not happy with Putin. I can tell you that much right now, Trump said, expressing his frustration with the Russian president over the war in Ukraine. And remember, Donald Trump told us he could bring an end to this conflict within a day. And the problem he's having with Putin is President Putin is not capitulating. He's not conceding first and negotiating second. That's the problem the president's having with President Putin. Trump says he's sending more weapons to Ukraine after some shipments were paused. Unbeknownst to Trump, his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, canceled some missile shipments to Ukraine. Once Trump found that out, he realized Hegseth had made another huge mistake. And finally, the Wall Street Journal reports Trump combats taco reputation. And remember, the taco is an acronym for Trump always chickens out as he extends the tariff deadline. With all of that, let's now move to my guest. On today's episode, the issue before us is yesterday, Trump held a 90-minute second meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House. The two leaders were also joined by Vice President J.D. Vance. And again, I ask, what is an alleged war criminal? And I say alleged because we know what he's done, but he hasn't been convicted in a criminal court. What's he doing traversing the halls of Congress? Well, let's talk to my guest. He's the creator of Free Palestine TV, which you can find at freepalestine.video. He's an award-winning journalist, commentator, and analyst based in Beirut, Lebanon. My brother, Laith Marouf. As always, man, welcome back.
Great to be with you, Wilmer.
So let me get your take on what I just mentioned in the open. Netanyahu brings his "we just got our hind part stomped" tour to the White House and to the halls of Congress, while Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi has warned that if Israel is not held accountable for its attack on Iran, quote, the whole region and beyond will suffer. Laith, I think there are some things transpiring that we're not aware of in the West. What's going on right now?
Well, clearly, the whipping that the Zionists got on their behind from Iran, responding to their unprovoked attack, is now, forcing the elite in the Zionist colony and in the West to find a way to regain their dignity and their ego, and that idea that they're untouchable. So, of course, the United States wasn't able to deliver on what the Zionists wanted with the attacks on Iran. The United States went as far as possible below the nuclear threshold to achieve the aims that the Zionist colony wants in Iran, and failed. And therefore, right now, Trump is listening to Netanyahu's dictates of what next. And the region, of course, because of the continued genocide in Gaza, means it's still boiling, and there's a lot of still resistance, as you mentioned before in your entrance description about what was happening in Yemen. There's all the talk about Lebanon, and so we should be expecting that either the Zionist colony, with the help of the United States, will conduct a new attack on Lebanon, because they can't touch Yemen and they can't touch Iran, and or instigate something in Iraq. And we're beginning to see both of those possibilities in Lebanon and Iraq unfolding right now.
Billy Willis, thank you, a new member. Thank you very much for joining the club. And Robert Brown, thank you very much for that $10 contribution. Excuse me, greatly appreciate it. To what you've just laid out in terms of the United States and Israel planning another attack, we've been reading reports that the United States is incredibly low on their ballistic missile cover, and that they're down. We saw articles that the United States is down to 25%. So if they were to launch another attack, it seems as though the iron sieve that we thought was an iron dome has now just become even more penetrable than it was before. So elaborate on that, if you would, please.
Yeah, so we know now from Western media that the THAAD systems, the number of missiles that the Americans used in the defense of the Zionist colony, is almost 75% of the cachet that the United States has. And this is at a cost of $2 billion only of THAAD missiles. The United States had to withdraw the THAAD missile systems that it had in South Korea to even station them in the Zionist colony and in Saudi Kingdom to shoot down the missiles of Iran. So they even were willing to leave South Korea and Japan without any air cover for a possible attack by North Korea. This is how desperate they were. And we're, if we count the fact that the United States can produce almost just around 20 of those missiles a year, with the exhaustion of the Patriot missile stockpiles, both in Ukraine and in the defense of the Zionist colony over the last 22 months, add to it, the Israelis themselves ran through most of their stockpile of Arrow 1, 2, 3, and David Sling missiles. So the United States is overstretched right now, and it's in a vulnerable position. Even if we look just over the last 24 hours, what Russia has been doing in Ukraine, the mass hits that it's achieving in most of the Ukrainian territory, even all the way close to the borders with Poland, that means the air defense systems in Ukraine are also right now suffering because of the war that just happened between Iran and the U.S. and on one side and Israel. So it's clear that the air defense costs for that 12-day war must be in the billions of dollars if we count the Israeli systems and the Patriots and the everything that the other countries spent, like Jordan and so on, as well as add to it all the air jets in the air trying to shoot down drones, add to it the destruction on the ground of the Zionist colony and their air defense systems and their bases and so on. This must have been the most expensive 12-day war in the history of humanity, clearly.
And Cherie, thank you very much for that very generous $20 super sticker. Laith, she loves you, and everyone in the chat. And Cherie, you know, as a member of the club, right back at you. So here's a question that I think a lot of people would be asking. Oh, well, no, first, the predicate to the question is what you've just laid out tells me it's not always what they report, it's what they don't report. And you've got to read between the lines, because if the United States is down to 25% of their THAAD missiles, to the degree that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, unilaterally stopped the flow of THAADs to Ukraine, much to Donald Trump's dismay, Israel took a much bigger whipping than they want to admit. So with that being the predicate to the question, I think many would ask, this would be an opportune time for Iran to send lob a few missiles in, or is that what Ansar Allah is doing right now?
So look at this, what happened in the 12-day war.
Mm-hmm.
The United States had to pull all its air power from the region because it was scared of Iran's response.
Mm-hmm.
It had to even pull back the B-2s and B-52s from Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean because they were scared of what would happen once they attack Iran. And they decided to fly those B-2s all the way from U.S. territory.
Mm-hmm.
And to equip them with the largest weapons at the disposal of the American military that are below the nuclear threshold. And in these raids, they failed to achieve their goal.
Mm-hmm.
So now, even before Iran responded, the United States was exposed as unable to defeat Iran if it doesn't cross the red line of nuclear weapon deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So once we're at that stage, Iran had a choice. If it would have immediately retaliated against the United States bases in the region and killed a mass number of American soldiers with no warning, and or if it went berserker on the Zionist colony, right? The United States would have been cornered into a position that it would have had to use a nuclear weapon.
Okay.
Similarly, Israel, if it was bombarded at a mass scale, already look, the last day of bombardment by Iran showed that Iran can totally wipe Israel off the map. They keep on talking about this for 80 years, that the Arabs want to wipe them off the map. Well, honestly, Iran could have done that. But again, Israel has 200, if not 400 nuclear heads, and they're in submarines that are been gifted to them by the Germans. So we would have, Iran's response had to be calculated in a way that doesn't allow the crossing of the nuclear threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And that was by attacking the base in Qatar that had the most air defense systems protection in the region, after calling the US and telling it we're coming, and them pulling everybody out and still hitting it, even with all the defenses prepared to
Mm-hmm.
supposedly shoot down the Iranian missiles, and 5 out of the 16 missiles that Iran fired on Al Udeid air base in Qatar landed and destroyed mass parts of the base. So right now we are in this moment where it's a race of time. Can the Zionists and the Americans behind them, American government, create conditions that can slow down the inevitable end of the Zionist colony, the collapse of the Zionist colony itself, and the American presence in the region by creating some other chaos somehow that will. But all Iran needs, and all that the Palestinian people need, and all the axis of resistance needs right now is just to wait this out. The Zionist colony is hated universally, not only on the planet. If there was aliens that we can communicate with, they'll all tell us that they hate Israel. Okay, this is how bad the situation is for the Zionists. Militarily, they're defeated against the Palestinians in Gaza, against the Lebanese in South Lebanon, against Yemen, against Iran. The United States cannot stop the collapse military of the Zionists if it doesn't use a nuclear weapon. And if it does use a nuclear weapon, then we're in a third world war, and we're entering into a nuclear holocaust for all of humanity. And so this is right now just a moment of us waiting for the collapse, and we hope it collapses faster than we expect.
You just mentioned the base at Diego Garcia, and Kevin Baptiste asked, well, he just said, so somebody asked here, where is Diego Garcia? And Kevin Baptiste has said, in the Indian Ocean, which, Kevin, I'm glad you know your geography, because that's exactly where it is. And to your point, Laith, it's the it's on the Chagos archipelago, which is a group of islands near the Maldives, off in the Indian Ocean, off the tip of India. And the United States has a very large base there on the Chagos archipelago. Diego Garcia is the largest island in this stream of islands.
And the Chagos people were occupied by the British, and they forcefully displaced them and threw them on Mauritius, island. And they won in court in the UK, the people, the right to return to their islands, and the Supreme Court of the UK ruled on that, and the UK is refusing to let them back because it had leased Diego Garcia Island to the US to use it as its long-range bombers base. So this is stolen land, colonized in theft, against even the colonial rule of the UK Supreme Court, being used to conduct a genocide against another indigenous people in Palestine and in Iran.
Peace in the World just gave us a $20 contribution, I guess, because we got the answer right to the question, where is Diego Garcia? And that's not to be confused with where in the world is Carmen Sandiego. Don't get those two things confused. And now Billy Willis says, I respectively and strongly disagree with your perspective, Laith. Billy, if you could elaborate a little bit on your point, so we'll have an idea of where in fact you actually disagree, we might be able to engage in some dialogue to that. I want to go quickly back to Yemen and to Ansar Allah, because we haven't been hearing hardly anything in the Western press regarding Ansar Allah's ongoing missile barrages into the Zionist colony. So if you could provide some insight into what's going on there, are they hitting any targets in this claim now that they sank a ship in the Red Sea?
Yes, yes. So after the end of the 12-day war, the Zionists wanted to kind of score points and show their own populace that somehow they still have the kahunas for it. And they attacked the port cities, as you mentioned, on the Red Sea. And these are places that were already attacked multiple times, including by the United States before the United States surrendered and withdrew from the region, Al-Hudaydah and so on. Though the ports and the electricity plant. And what Yemen responded with is saying that they have reinstituted their blockade on the Zionist colony, but not only now the naval blockade will not only target ships going through the Red Sea towards the Zionist colony, it will also target any shipping company that has any ships docking in the Zionist colony ports. And that's happened today, yesterday and today. 2 ships that were not going to the Zionist colony, but belong to companies that continue shipping to the Zionist colony, were attacked. And the first one, we saw the video this morning. Basically, the company is so invested in Zionism, it doesn't care about its own staff, its own seamen that are on these ships, and forced them to go in and told them to shoot at the Yemeni armed forces, which they were shooting at the Yemeni armed forces, and the Yemeni armed forces got on the ship and fought back and killed them all. Now, all the sailors that were on this ship are dead because their company would rather continue working with the genocidal regime than save its own workers and its own ship. And they blew it up with drones, the ship, after the Yemeni armed forces mounted it. And they did the same for another ship that was the battle lasted almost 24 hours. And it included drones and boats and seafaring drones and so forth, and it sunk again two ships. So now the insurance companies are going to raise their insurance for any company that still works with the Zionist colony, even if their ships are not going to go through there, because their other ships are going to be a target. And the United States issued a statement this morning that sounded like thoughts and prayers, and it was funny to actually see the United States public.
We feel your pain.
Yes, it's like a statement that they issue for the Palestinians usually. We feel about the dead babies, but what can we do about it? So this is the same situation. So that shows you how Yemen has been able to neutralize the American involvement in its attacks. And while all of this is happening, the ships being targeted, Yemen, over the last 48 hours, have fired at least 7 hypersonic missiles and multiple drones on the airport outside Tel Aviv, on the ports in Ashdod and in Eilat. So this is continuing, and Yemen is not going to be an easy fight for the Zionists. They can't fight this without the United States, and the United States has withdrawn.
Billy Willis clarified his point. It's my belief that Iran did not respond strongly against Israel and the U.S., unfortunately, because of the conventional power of the Israeli Air Force.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a big rumor that one of the B-2 bombers was shot down. There was a lot of, chatter on the mediascape, including the military followers that follow the planes. One of the B-2 bombers didn't go back to the base in the United States. So we don't know what happened there. Iran doesn't want to humiliate the United States. It doesn't want to corner it into this situation. The damage in the Zionist colony is tremendous. I mean, look, this is a word that Trump likes to use, but the images that we saw, one hypersonic missile from Iran took out 16 buildings in Tel Aviv. If
Really?
Iran won it, they would have wiped out all of Tel Aviv. And the Israeli media right now, over the last few days, is admitting that the major air bases and the major command and control hubs in Israel are destroyed. And we heard from Israeli media yesterday that, in fact, the Israeli government had to create a shadow command and control because they were so scared of the assassination of their main command and control structures. And the Israeli television today said that the Kiryat, which is the Pentagon, basically, of Israel, is destroyed. It's going to take 6 months to rebuild. And this includes the bunkers under. So the destruction is massive. The Israelis still are hiding how much destruction there is. But we also can gauge the amount of the effect of this destruction on what's happening on the ground in Gaza. Those huge successes that the resistance is achieving over the last 72 hours can be directly attributed to the destruction of the Mossad, Amman, and Shabak headquarters. Those are all the intelligence apparatuses of Israel, and all their major listening and information gathering posts in Bir Saba or Beersheba. And above and beyond that, the destruction of much of the mechanical, fixing bases, whatever you call them, for the Israeli military around Gaza. So we have multiple things that are telling us how much was the effect of the Iranian missile destruction of Israel.
And Billy Willis also says, it is also my belief that if Iran has the military power that Laith suggests, it should send a strong message to Israel with power. And you just spoke about the very fragile line. If I understand what you're explaining, that that Iran has to be incredibly calculating and careful about how it responds, because you made the point that Iran doesn't want to embarrass the United States, because it look, folks, Iran is not a peer competitor to the United States. It understands that very clearly. So it has to be incredibly calculating and incredibly strategic in when it responds and how it responds. Because, to Laith's point, Iran does not want to start a nuclear conflict when it has no nuclear weapon to respond. So is that a fair assessment, Laith?
Yes. Look, I want us all to, I know we're all emotional about the genocide. I'm a Palestinian. I'm also a Syrian. I just saw my country being abducted and raped by Wahhabi death squads. I want all of this to be over now. But the reality is, on October 7th, 2,000 fighters from an extermination camp in Gaza were able to defeat the combined might of the Israeli elite units around it. 12 bases destroyed and their generals killed or abducted. And the response from the West, before anyone even entered to defend Gaza, before the genocide started, was sending the largest naval armada since World War II. 85 or 86 aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, and nuclear submarines parked on the shores of Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine. So you could imagine if actually on October 7th, Hezbollah attacked at the same time from Lebanon, for sure they would have been in Haifa within hours, and they would have liberated much of North Palestine, and the West Bank would have been up in arms, and it's over. But that would have immediately drove the United States and the Zionist colony to throw nuclear weapons on Arab and Muslim capitals. This is not a joke.
Mm-hmm.
This is true.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, the whole axis of resistance has been trying to slowly take apart the Zionist colony, expose it as much as possible.
A war of attrition.
Yes, in a war of attrition. Not because they couldn't destroy Israel. God damn, man. We've just watched Yemen defeat the combined naval power of the West.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing as Israeli power. Israel doesn't exist. The Israeli military is crap. It cannot fight any ground war. It needs non-stop supply with everything that it needs, and all the intelligence services and the surveillance and the air power of the whole West has to be dedicated to it to fight militias, not armies. So Israel is not in the same category as Iran. Iran is a second-rate power. You have the superpowers, China, Russia, and the United States, and then the second rate, there's Iran. France and Germany and the UK are not even on the stage of Iran, although France and the UK have nuclear weapons. So Israel is a puny little, what can I say, sewer garbage place. That's what it is. And their soldiers are all pedophiles that want to dress up in women's lingerie. They can't fight the war. So no, there is no parity between Iran and Israel. Israel is a little piece of shit. Sorry about that. Iran is a second-rate power. The United States is the one that's fighting this war since day one, and the whole West with it. Okay. Now, can the axis of resistance defeat the Zionist colony? They can. But can they fight the whole West combined in a full-out war? That's suicide, because the West will use nuclear weapons. And right now, it's been 22 months. We bled the whole Western alliance. We exposed Zionism as a Jewish supremacist ideology, a genocidal Jewish supremacist ideology. We exposed the whole West. Every child that is dying in Gaza in front of our eyes is exposing the 500, 600 years of Western supremacy that genocided whole continents, is destroying the propaganda of the West about human rights and all of that. The West itself is eating itself up. Look at what's happening in the UK. There's no more freedoms or rights for any citizen in the West. And this wouldn't happen if this is not dragged on. And the more this is dragged on, the more the collapse of the empire and the Zionist colony will be less violent in the end. We don't want a huge bang in the end that ends up swallowing the whole of humanity in a war. We want this to fizzle out. That's the best choice we can do.
And here's another element of this to put another sentence after the period you just left, and that is, you can't make the mistake of assessing or trying to analyze Yemen's response or Iran's response through an American perspective or lens. They have different objectives. Iran and Yemen, they have a different objective than the West. They are a resistance movement. And resistance movements have different objectives than the oppressor. Again, read People's War, People's Army, and you'll understand the resistance movement, different tactics, different objectives. They're defensive, not offensive. So you make a big mistake when you try to analyze or assess Yemen's responses or Iran's responses through an American context or perspective, because you're trying to play tennis by cricket rules. You're trying to play basketball on a baseball diamond. It doesn't equate. You can't do it that way. So is that fair to say, Laith?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
So Jay says, question for Laith. What do you think the axis of resistance will do about the U.S. imperialist plan to put 600,000 Palestinian people into concentration camps and turn Gaza to a Western resort?
These are hallucinations of a dying empire. Okay. We saw, of course, Trump sitting with Netanyahu in the White House and being asked about the possibility of expelling Palestinians to other countries. And Trump saying, well, you have the greatest man on earth right here. These are the actual words that the emperor used. Greatest man in the world. And he has the answer for you. And what came out of Netanyahu's mouth was a clear example of hallucinations. It's like, oh, we've got a dozen countries, everybody around is great with us. All this show of what the exposing of real power, who's behind what control in the United States and in the West, wouldn't have happened if this war hasn't been dragged on like this. To see the American president, the emperor of the strongest empire that history has ever known, say that the greatest nation on earth is Israel to his own people, and that the greatest man on earth is the president or prime minister of Israel, not him. This is so degrading to I mean, I don't think it's ever happened in history. And this carries on from this idea that the Western, quote unquote, Christian and secular elite are telling their own people that Jews are better than them, that they are a chosen people, and there's a promised land for them, and we should die for them. Again, unprecedented in human history, that any nation, any civilization degrades itself in the service of a tiny colony. Okay, all of these things were exposed in this, and now how are the Zionists going to achieve this? They haven't been able to defeat the Palestinians for 22 months. They can continue killing Palestinians. No external nation, including ones that are vassals of the West, will take Palestinians, because the Palestinians will resist from whatever country they're in, including the ones that you saw in New York and DC and London and Toronto. The Palestinians there are resisting. And so any country that will host Palestinians will have to deal with their resistance. So no nation will take them that are even vassals of the United States.
I want to clarify, or ask you to clarify, a point you just made about whose interests are being served here. You said the United States is serving the interests of Israel. You remember Alexander Haig saying that Israel is the unsinkable aircraft carrier in the region. Well, I think Haig was speaking in the context of the U.S. Navy, not the Israeli Navy. So just a fine point, but I think it's important to make the point of Israel they're serving each other's interests. And I think that is something that is very, very important for people to understand. When Haig talked about the unsinkable aircraft carrier, that aircraft carrier, euphemistically, is in the United States Navy.
Yes. But, look, I, for a long time, obviously, would make sure we differentiate and say, of course, there's imperialism and colonialism prior to Zionism, and the Zionists are serving imperial aims. But there's been now a total integration. It's a symbiosis at this
Yes.
point.
And that's
Right?
my point. Yes.
Yeah, it's a symbiosis, and unfortunately, if it wasn't a symbiosis, it would have gotten to a point where the United States
Said
would
enough.
said enough.
Right.
But as we see from that press conference with Netanyahu, it's now a total symbiosis. He's basically asking him to tell the media what the United States is going to do. I don't think he does that to any other president. And the political system in the US or the West in general, most of them are right now like that, in full symbiosis with the Zionists.
And to that point, there's a piece in Consortium News, and I'll just read this quickly to make the point about how the narrative is shifting. Largest U.S. labor union cuts ties to major Israeli defender. The largest labor union in the U.S. has taken a major step toward, quote, fostering respect for the rights and dignity of all students in public schools by voting to cut ties with the Anti-Defamation League, calling it not the social justice educational partner it claims to be. The NEA, which represents nearly 3 million educators, approved a measure saying it will not use, endorse, or publicize materials from the ADL, such as its curricular materials or statistics. I make that point to say the bricks in the wall, one by one, as Pink Floyd would say, it's just another brick in the wall. Let's go as our time is short here. You have a phenomenal piece you have a phenomenal piece at your website that is entitled "The Ceasefire That Never Was: Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran." It's an interview with photojournalist Courtney Bonneau. And folks, I strongly, very, very strongly suggest you go to freepalestine.video, go to freepalestine.video and watch all of the coverage. But the ceasefire that never was: Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran. Laith Marouf.
Yeah, like Courtney is a photojournalist. She's Dutch. She's been here in Lebanon from before the war, living in the south of Lebanon. So she ended up, living throughout the war in the south and covering. And so when we do our field reporting, we like to have guests sometimes, and she's been on our shows, on our field reports, and our wartime cafe, discussing her history and so on. And this report and another one that we just came out with today we discussed specifically what she witnessed in terms of violations of the ceasefire in Lebanon. And we talk about, of course, the ceasefire that never was, or that keeps on being started and then disrupted in Gaza. And now we have this ceasefire in Iran that could be violated at any moment. We don't know how this is going to end. Courtney and our team also in Free Palestine TV were targeted multiple times by Zionists. Yesterday when we were filming on the border with Palestine, an Israeli sniper aimed at us. We were just beside the UN base. So that shows you how dangerous and the work is, but also how depraved these soldiers are when we're standing beside the UN soldiers and they're aiming their snipers at us. Like people can watch our coverage. We're out on the field every 2 days, and we hope people can follow and donate if they can. Our viewers are our only source of income.
And Billy Willis, I he says, when I see what's happening in Gaza, it breaks my heart. Netanyahu must be stopped. Power is the only thing that will do it again. He strongly disagrees with your assessment, and that's fine. That's why we have these. That's why we have guests such as Laith and Billy. The only thing I'll say to you in that regard is, I truly respect your disagreement with the assessment, but Laith is a Palestinian and a Syrian journalist living in Beirut. He's not coming from Baltimore here. He's not coming from Boston. He's joining us from, and he's on the front line reporting. Go to freepalestine.video. So,
you mentioned Pink Floyd.
Yeah, yes, I did.
And
Roger Waters.
Yes.
Waters. Yes.
Yeah. And just to show people, how things are developing, where we at this moment in human consciousness. Okay. The goddamn UK government prescribed Palestine Action, a nonviolent direct action group in the UK. They prescribed them as terrorist organization along with Al-Qaeda and others. The UK courts had boilerplate decisions ready to respond to the appeals within hours, including the appeals court that was convened at 12 o'clock at night and had its decision ready. So that shows you, on the one hand, how much right now the work for the liberation of Palestine has exposed governments in the West and is forcing them to abandon all the theatrics of natural justice and judicial system and courts and international law and human rights. All of that is falling apart. And we have now hundreds of thousands of people in the UK that could be jailed for 14 years for saying, I support Palestine Action. And the whole prison population of the UK is 90,000 people. Okay, it's not a big prison population. So you could imagine how much the UK government is willing to invest in to maintain control over the populace who are now revolting against the genocide. And as we see, Roger Waters of Pink Floyd published a video saying, we are all Palestine Action, I am Spartacus, and now they're threatening Roger Waters of Pink Floyd to be taken to jail for 14 years, a man in his 80s. Okay? And just a few hours ago, before we got on air here, the Secretary of Justice in the US declared the United Nations Special Rapporteur for Palestine, Frances Albanese, put her on the terrorist list and put sanctions on her. Okay? So this is the level of insanity and how scared that the most powerful men and governments on earth right now are. They are going to these extremes to try to silence the tsunami of anti-Zionist sentiment in the human family. And there's nothing they can do. They can try to scare, but we've crossed a threshold with the musician, the band, the duo, Bob Vylan, getting on stage and saying death, death to the IDF. That's a threshold. There's no going back from it. And so I want the end of the genocide. And I think at the same time, I do not want to see a world war. And the way that my people, including those who designed October 7th and the Al-Aqsa flood, the martyrs like Yahya Sinwar of Hamas and their military leadership, they designed October 7th to force the world into this. And they knew that they are going to most probably be martyrs themselves before seeing the results of it. Similarly, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah, he knew at that point of where we opened this war at the defense of Gaza, the support frontier, that it's most probable that he will be a martyr too. And those are choices that honorable men that want to sacrifice for their people but do not want to be genociders themselves and or responsible for end of humanity. Those are the choices that real warriors make. You're muted. Yeah, you're muted, Wilmer.
Thank you, Brother Willie Hicks, for that $20 super sticker. He says, I was pro-Israel until Dr. Leon introduced me to people like Miko Peled and Laith Marouf, and I learned what's really going on. I can't thank you enough. Brother Willie Hicks, I can't thank you enough for listening to the show, supporting the show, and demonstrating the power of dialogue. Because this all comes through guests such as Laith, honest, open dialogue, and people being willing to listen. All I'm asking is you listen, and then based upon what the information that you're being presented here, you make your own decisions. And folks, if you need to check out OPSEC LLC if you're in Maryland. Check out OPSEC LLC. So Laith, there was another great. So there was a piece in the Washington Post for Netanyahu and Trump. A vision of peace belies Gaza reality. When Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu comes to the White House, there's going to be a lot of talk about peace. Trump seems to be in a peacemaking mood. After briefly bombing Iran last month, he hailed a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Trump took credit for the truce, though analysts warn that implementing the deal involving a range of armed groups and entrenched insurgency may prefer tougher than brokering it. Your thoughts on this piece?
Yeah, I mean, clearly there's no peace. The United States had to force Israel to stop because the United States didn't want a full war with Iran. It cannot afford one. And the destruction of much of the Zionist colony, abilities is there's no way you can make that up. Okay. For now, I think the United States and Israel will attempt to create chaos in Iran in different ways. They failed to create an uprising. They failed to, create a schism within the state and/or ethnic groups and linguistic groups. And so they may return to the terrorism that we saw before. But this time, Iran is not going to allow this to just pass. Okay, so if Israel does anything inside Iranian territory, no matter how insignificant it is, the Iranians will be retaliating. And it's clear the United States cannot stop Iranian retaliation. So we're at this stage where the Zionists may actually start wars in Lebanon and or Iraq. That's the most probable thing that will happen, but not confrontation with Iran.
And hang on 1 second. Let me check this. Oh, I think I got that message. Okay. Yeah, I got it. And Kevin Baptiste question, Laith, do you feel Iran has exercised too much restraint? And he wants to be clear, he means no disrespect to Iran.
Look, for a long time, I was anxious about things. But I look at how crazy the American elite are. and how unhinged the Western elite in general are, and the Zionist elite. And it's almost like you have to, put them in a straitjacket instead of getting into confrontation with them. And that's what we need to do. They lost their war against Russia. They've lost the war in 22 months, unable to defeat a besieged population and an extermination camp. That's like, I mean, there will be, poems, Vulcans, and no, man. Look, this is really unbelievable. The odds of the Palestinian resistance fighting for 22 months, the whole combined power of the West. That's a humongous humiliation. Yes, with a lot of blood and sacrifice, but when has something like this ever happened? None of the decolonizing people in the wars over the 20th century had to deal with these odds.
And let me try to give another example. Let me use a boxing example or metaphor as a counterpuncher. Counterpunchers tend to lose when they shift their strategy and try to become the aggressor in the battle instead of continuing to counterpunch. And if you look at what Russia is doing in Ukraine, Russia has refused to take the bait of the United States and go all in full bore. Putin knew from the very beginning that Biden was trying to bait him into a response so that the United States would have the so-called justification or be able to construct the narrative. You see what Russia's doing? Now we got to go in full bore with nuclear weapons. China, President Xi Jinping would not take the bait over Taiwan. And both Russia and China are much bigger and stronger than Iran, but they would not take the bait. They're counterpunchers. Folks, you've got to, as Lonnie Liston Smith would say, expand your mind, because you can't fall into the trap that the United States is trying to set. Final point, Laith Marouf, it's very late for you in the day, and I appreciate you giving me the time that you have. I'll let you take us wherever you want to go.
Yeah, like look, I look at it this way. The West has brought humanity into an edge, and also over the last 30 years, there's been so much pumped into the mind of the Western, citizenry about hate against Arabs and Muslims in general, whether calling them terrorists or so forth. Like that, although it's very possible for the axis of resistance to start blowing things up right now anywhere they want to, like we saw how those drones were used against Russia in the heart of it, and or Iran, those smuggled drones that attacked the air defenses of Iran in the western regions. Anyone can do that. But imagine if the axis of resistance decided, yes, we're going to cut the supply routes to Israel by attacking things in Europe, in the United States, which they have the right to.
We're going to mine the heart. We're going to mine the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes, they could have done these things. They could have started chaos in the streets of London and Berlin and so forth. That's possible. But they don't do this because the whole point was of how this war has been conducted is to not only diffuse 100 years of propaganda against the Palestinian people and propaganda in the mind of Western citizens about what is Israel and what is Zionism and its history, but you also had to deprogram the rest of humanity against this idea of human rights and freedom of speech and international law that the West has been lying about for 100 years. And piece by piece, that got all exposed, and the West discarded it themselves. Okay, so in those 22 months, Gaza has liberated much of the world's mind. And this is an achievement that is unprecedented in such a small period of time.
Mm-hmm.
You deprogrammed 3 generations of people on this planet. So this all could have not happened had the resistance been much more vicious and played into this idea that we are monsters, we're animals, the Arabs and the Muslims.
What did Dr. King do? What did Dr. King do with nonviolent direct action? He understood very clearly optics, the power of imagery. Do not resist the police with the hoses. Do not resist the police with the dogs. You will not only lose that fight, you will lose the bigger fight of the narrative. I think that's part of what is playing itself out here, Laith Marouf.
Yes, yes. And of course, this is not non-violent, but it is honorable warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just opposing honorable warfare versus monstrosities of mass rape and mass genocide.
Because one more thing, Muslims have rules of engagement based upon the Quran, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
and that's what's being followed here. Are their rules of engagement?
And this is all also juxtaposed against a fake Muslim that was being molded by the West, that's represented in these Wahhabi death squads, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, HTS, that was being put forward under the control of CIA and the Mossad, put forward in front of the Western public to tell them that is Islam and that is how Muslims are. Okay, so the axis of resistance and its Muslim leaders, Shia and Sunni, are purposefully not being vicious and not following the rules of engagement under Islamic rule to also present to the Western audience this true vision of Islam, not the one that is molded at the hands of the CIA.
Folks, you got to dig deeper here. You got to dig deeper here. And I'm not impugning anybody's character in the chat but that's why you watch this show. That's why you watch this show, because you gotta get a bigger shovel and you gotta dig a little deeper, because we cannot assess this based upon our so-called value system. Again, you're trying to play baseball with football rules. It's not gonna work. My dear brother Laith Marouf, as always, man, thank you so much. Again, you always give me so much. Folks, you got to go to freepalestine.video. You got to go to freepalestine.video and watch his coverage and contribute, because that's frontline stuff. You're not going to see a bunch of people sitting around with suits on in a studio waxing nostalgic and poetic. No. In fact, with the piece I talked about the ceasefire, you're sitting there showing a guy picking up body parts off the ground. And you're not doing it to sensationalize the circumstance. You're showing what a missile does to a vehicle when the vehicle is struck by the missile, right? Folks,
yep. Yeah,
This is
and
real.
you're not gonna see gore and blood in our shows. We don't like to do that. So yeah, no, but it's definitely the field reporting. You get to see Lebanon and the region, like first person. You travel with us, so you're not gonna see the Hollywood camels in Lebanon because there's no camels in Lebanon. It's not gonna be sepia colored either, like.
There are no camels in Lebanon. Why? Because Israel sent them all to Egypt.
Because there's no desert in Lebanon, but somehow every time Hollywood has a movie about Lebanon, there's a camel there.
And hey, folks, here's your class assignment from Professor Leon. Go to freepalestine.video. Your assignment for today is to watch 2 episodes of your choice at freepalestine.video. That's your assignment for today from Professor Leon, and you will be graded. Thanks, bro. Be safe. Love you, man. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye, Wilmer.
All right, folks. Let me do this really quickly, because there are 2 stories. Melody, there are 2 stories I want to hit, if you don't mind, really quickly. I touched on this, but I think it's worth touching on again. I just mentioned largest U.S. labor union cuts ties to major Israel defender. The National Education Association, which represents nearly 3 million educators, approved a measure saying it, quote, will not use, endorse, or publicize materials from the ADL, such as its curricular materials or statistics, end quote. This move is significant considering the influence the ADL has over teaching about Israel in the U.S. schools for decades, with the organization devising recent lesson plans about anti-Semitism, quote, in the extreme political left, end quote. Folks, that's a big story. Another story. J.D. Vance unleashes on socialist Mamdani in fiery patriotic speech. I was asked a while ago what I thought the impact of the New York election would be. And I said, it's too early to tell because we're going to have to wait and see what the Democrats do in response to Mamdani's victory in New York. Now you've got even the vice president slamming the socialist New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani during a speech, quote, today is the 5th of July, which means, as you all know, yesterday we celebrated the birth of the nation. Anyway, he goes on. Now the person who wishes to lead our largest city had, according to multimedia reports, never once publicly mentioned America's Independence Day in earnest. But when he did so, this is what he said, and this is the quote. I'm not even going to read the quote. I'm just showing you that now both sides of the aisle are training their sights, sharpening their knives for in opposition to Zohan Mamdani. And then New York City real estate executives throw money behind Eric Adams to counter the rise of Mamdani. New York City real estate executives are throwing support and money behind him, behind Eric Adams, to fight and block the Democratic mayoral nominee, Zohran Mamdani, who campaigned on a rent freeze to help solve the city's housing crisis. And final point here, folks, one of the biggest issues that has developed in this race is Mamdani's response to the question, are you going to go to Israel if you win? All the other candidates said, my first trip will be to Israel. Mamdani said, no, I'm staying here in New York. I'm going to be elected the mayor of New York City, and my job is to improve the conditions of people living in New York City. Folks, that makes nothing but sense. But see, the implicit in the question was, are you going to go and kneel before the benefactor and kiss the ring? And his answer was no, because the benefactor for me, if I'm speaking on his behalf, are the citizens of New York that elected me to office, not the interest groups that are trying to buy influence. So what we're going to have to find out here, what we're going to have to wait and see, what does Mamdani do? Does he maintain course and speed? If I can use a nautical reference, does he maintain course and speed? Or does he change course based on pressure? And if he does the former, we'll have to see what impact that has on the national political landscape. Because just like the National Education Association, if he stays true to his campaign promises and works on behalf of the people of New York and not the special interests in New York, that could prove to be a major problem for, what's his name, the governor of California, who's now getting on the campaign trail, and Gavin Newsom, who's now in South Carolina, endorsed by James Clyburn. Oh my God. I'm riding with Biden. I'm riding with Biden. Okay. So with that, hey folks, thank you all so much for joining me today. And tomorrow, my guest is independent journalist Mike Fox, who just covered the BRICS summit in Brazil. He'll be joining us from Ecuador, and we're going to be talking about the BRICS summit with an independent journalist who covered the entire thing. So thank you all for joining the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon, again tomorrow. Mike Fox joining us from Ecuador as we're going to talk about the BRICS summit. Follow us on social media. Share the show. All the links are below. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, remember, this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See you tomorrow. Until then, peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.